creators, how are you guys? It's great to hang out with you again for another Video Creators Podcast episode and live stream. Good to see all of you guys who are here in the chat. Today, we're going to talk about some ways that you can create your ultimate YouTube video with a friend of mine, Jeff Bartsch, who is here. Hey, Jeff, how are you, man?
Yo, good to see you. Glad to be here.
Good to have you. Now, for you guys who might be listening to this later or who are here in the stream, you're like, Jeff? Who is Jeff? I clicked because I wanted to hear how to create my ultimate YouTube video. Who's Jeff? What is Jeff all about? Jeff, I want you to introduce yourself here in just a second. But for those of you who are in the chat, excited to see you guys ask your questions. We're going to get to all those here in a little bit. And those of you guys who are listening later, we'd love to have you join us on a Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern time sometime for these live recordings and join about a couple hundred other YouTube creators who are all helping each other out in the chat. So, but today, let's talk about how do we create ultimate YouTube videos. So Jeff, you and I have known each other for a little while. In fact, I spent the night at your house once.
It's true.
When I ended up homeless, and I was like, Jeff, can I come over?
Yeah, better at our place than living under a bridge, sleeping under a bridge somewhere.
So at VidCon last year, I had messed up my travel arrangements and I did not book a hotel for the final night. And I was leaving out of I flew in through LAX, but I was flying out through whatever the other one is.
Through Burbank or John Wayne?
Burbank.
Okay.
No.
Oh, yeah, it's Burbank.
Yeah, Burbank. And
far better.
I didn't have a place to stay that night. And so I called Jeff and I was like, hey, how's it going? How close are you to Burbank? You're like, not that far at all. And I'm like, oh, good, because could I stay at your house tonight? And you and your wife are very accommodating last minute. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that's about us a little bit. Tell us a little about yourself. What do you do in Hollywood? Why do you live out there?
Sure. I actually came out to Hollywood because my whole life I've been I've been a communicator in one form or another. And the way that turned into a career was I ended up coming out to Los Angeles for film school, and I got into the entertainment industry as a television editor. So I've spent the last 20 years out here in Los Angeles working as a TV editor. And I've worked for pretty much pretty much everyone. I've cut for NBC, ABC, Universal, Disney, ESPN, all kinds of folks, and been featured in a bunch of press. People even put some of my stuff in textbooks, which is kind of weird because they never told me. And I just kind of stumbled across it on the net one day, and it's like, oh, Jeff Bartsch, as television editor Jeff Bartsch says, I'm just like, I'm being quoted in textbooks. It's kind of crazy. And actually wrote a book of my own called Edit Better, Hollywood Tested Strategies for Powerful Video Editing. And folks have had some very strong positive reactions to that too. And I'm also the upshot of this is I have layered what I've been learning over the last 20 years in Los Angeles in the entertainment industry. I'm layering that on top of what it means to actually be a YouTube creator, because that's what I do now as well.
And you've been doing that for like a year and a half now, 2 years, something like that?
This is actually 3 years.
3 years, wow.
I'm okay. In the third year, past the second anniversary at this point. So it's time flies, man.
I remember one of the first videos I watched of yours, it was because we were doing a channel consultation. And I was watching, and then you had that one video that metaphorically blew my mind. Literally I would not be here, obviously. But yeah, it was about how to make your edits smooth as butter. I don't think that's the title of it, but
how to make smooth video edits. It's actually the thumbnail is me posing with a stick of butter.
Yeah,
I thought it was.
Which doesn't have anything to do with the content, but but the idea of like knowing where your audience eye is on the screen and then using motion to attract it around the screen and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah, I think I'm pretty sure I shared that video like everywhere, and that was That was cool. So here we are now, 3 years later.
My subscribers. Well, actually, I think that might have been separate from, like, you shared that video, and then at one point you had said, "I found this new channel. You should check it out." And my subscribers doubled in 24 hours, and I was just like crying. I was like, "Thank you, dude."
Well,
just
for those of you guys
thing that you do
who want to check out his channel, there is a link in the description of this live stream or in the show notes. If you guys are listening to the podcast and learn more about how to creatively edit your content to tell better stories, tell more engaging stories, and use it away as you've been doing better at reaching people and changing their lives. Because just making a video and posting on the internet doesn't necessarily change someone's life. Those people need to actually watch it and engage with it and enjoy it and receive that message that you're spreading from someone who they feel like actually is credible and that they like watching, and it's got to be delivered in a way that they'll actually consume it. Because unlike medicine and vitamins, we don't just take it because it's good for us, right? On YouTube, we watch because there's some sort of value that we want to get out of it. And so you've been doing this for a long time, Jeff, in Hollywood with a lot of television shows and things, and now you're kind of bringing a lot of your expertise to YouTube creators, and you've been working really hard on helping YouTube creators create their very best content so that they can better connect with their audience and increase the impact that they are having on the world. So when it comes to this topic about like your guide to creating the ultimate YouTube video, talk about where should we start with that?
Well, it's let's just start by saying that it's a pretty bold promise to say, hey, this is how to make your ultimate content. But
it's all downhill after this, guys.
The thing is, you can keep upping your game. So that's the cool part. You know, the place to start is just to give yourself some grace. That's the first thing. Because there is this thing that was, I want to step backwards into some ideas that apply to YouTube, but also they apply all over the place. There were some social psychologists by the name of David Dunning and Justin Kruger, and in 1999, they put out this research report called Unskilled and Unaware of It. How difficulties in recognizing one's own incompetence lead to inflated self-assessments. So what that means is, ever seen one of those people who have no clue what they're doing, but they think they're a genius? That's like an actual psychological thing. And there's a progression that we all go on when we're learning something new. And if you can imagine a vertical axis, it's confidence, your own confidence in what you're doing. And then there's the horizontal axis is the idea of expertise gained over time. And so what happens is you start out thinking, I got this. How hard could it be? It happens to everyone, saying it's like, how hard could it be? I'm a genius at this. And then when you actually start getting into it, you're like, oh, this is a lot harder than I thought. And so what some people have talked about, they say we all start on Mount Stupid up here. And then then we move forward and we realize that, oh, this is really tough. This is hard to do. And we fall into the valley of despair. And that's what I hear a lot from YouTube creators who, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's working. I don't know how to fix it. So first of all, just know that if you are in a place of frustration, number one, it is not just you. It happens to us all. And it happens in any learning curve that we do. You do learning curve. You have all sorts of learning curves yourself. I mean, like I've seen stuff on Instagram of you doing woodworking. I mean, like you do some really good stuff, man.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I having worked with it's like 1,000 creators now. It is not. I mean, it used to be surprising, but it's not. Like exactly what you're saying is true, which is that, hey, like I used to watch these YouTube videos and I thought to myself, I could do that, right? And so they start, and then they come to me about a few months later being like, oh my gosh, this is way harder than it looks. And I think I don't think it's just unique to YouTube. I think like I thought the same thing about different musicians who they play the piano in such a way that you look at it and you're like, that doesn't look so bad. Like I could learn to do that, right? Or different athletes or actors and actresses, and anyone who does what they do really well and makes it look effortless, like you editing American Ninja Warrior. I'm like, I could do that. But I've seen your timeline and I know, no way, I cannot do that. Like the sequence, and it was like, no stinking way. So I think that's just kind of happens on YouTube. Some people make it look so easy, so effortless. Oh, you just walk around with the camera and talk about your life for a living, Yeah. And so a lot of people start walking around talking about their life for a living, and they get crickets. They get nothing. They get no traction. And so, yeah, that is definitely a thing. And even with woodworking, I watch someone do that and I'm like, oh yeah, I could build that. And I start and I'm like, oh no, okay, I'm going to have a lot of scrap wood with a lot of errors in here, So,
well, so in terms of what you see working with all these people on YouTube, like there are a lot of things that people focus on that aren't necessarily unimportant. They're not important. They're not important if you want to go double negatives. But people focus on this stuff too early in the game without getting some bigger picture stuff in mind. I mean, what are the things that you're most likely to see? People putting the cart before the horse, if you will.
Typically, they haven't really figured out who they're trying to reach and who it is that cares about what the value they're trying to. And a lot of them haven't even defined the value they're providing. Some of them are just like, I see other people playing video games and then I'm just going to do that. Or I see other people vlogging their life, or I see other people doing these tutorials, or I see and they haven't really even figured out who the target audience is. It's the same mistake like most struggling businesses make, in my opinion, that I've seen. It's like when you ask them who their most ideal customer is, they don't even have a clear idea on that. And so then it makes it really hard for the customer to know if this is for me. Because they don't, the business owner doesn't even know if it's for them. Yeah. So it's like really having that clear idea of who it's for and why that person should care, and delivering the best value in the world to that audience. I mean, those are two the biggest things. Like when I do consultations, we usually start there, we dig into it, and then we'll move into more technical things after that stuff's kind of established. But that's kind of the foundation.
Well, and we're going to be digging into that very thing in just a minute here. And the thing that I see on top of that is so many people focus on what you hear people teachers on YouTube talking about, you need a solid title, you need a solid thumbnail and all these things. But then you also think, well, I also need really good gear, and I also need I need all this other stuff. But if you don't have these big picture ideas in place first, you will continue wallowing in that valley of despair along the Dunning-Kruger curve, if you will. And it's a fascinating idea. Like at least I find it fascinating. I geek out over this stuff. If you just look up Dunning-Kruger effect online, you'll see all kinds of commentary on this. So the thing that I want to offer is, you have so many ideas coming at you, and when you don't know what you don't know, you're looking for the way forward. You want to find a way to say, okay, how can I make sense of this all? So what I want to offer to us today is the idea that we can best make sense of things if we use something that I refer to as mental frameworks. And to set the scene a little bit for mental frameworks, you got to, again, we're going to step out of the YouTube world and go into the world of neuroscience.
Ooh, believe it or not. This is getting way deeper than we normally go.
well,
this is why we have Jeff here. We have smart people here to talk about this stuff.
Side note, just you talk about creativity, and that creativity often comes with making connections between different things and different places. So why not see what happens in the world of neuroscience and see how it can apply to our creativity and our content creation. So there is a neuroscientist by the name of Lisa Feldman Barrett who wrote a book called How Emotions Are Made: The Secret Life of the Brain. And in a nutshell, and it's also a fascinating book, which I highly recommend. She says that in order for our brains to understand anything, literally anything, whether we're talking about, what is YouTube, or what is a video camera, or why do I love my family so much, what is love? Our brain has to have two things in order to understand anything, and it has to have a mental model, and it has to have instances. And so what a model is, basically, it's your brain putting together a framework to say, okay, this is something that, this is the ideas that surround this concept that I'm trying to make sense of. And so, if, say, what is YouTube? And you're like, well, it's a website. Okay, what's a website? Well, you have to know what that is. And so that's the other separate framework that your brain has to go into. But then you have to say it's something that does this. You can consume video content. Oh, then you figure out, oh, well, you can create video content too. Oh, well, so, and then it goes, there are all the different rabbit holes you can go down. So then not only do you have to know what YouTube is specifically, then to really understand it, to have a comprehension of it, you have to have instances of interacting on YouTube. Sometimes it's just, you're watching content, and other times it's creating content. Other times it's talking with people about creating content. It's all about that stuff. And so with our content creation, we have our best possibility of escaping all that information overwhelm and making sense of all this muddle that we get into, and the indecision and the frustration, if we apply this idea of mental models to our content creation. And so what I say, instead of using, the more psychological term mental model, I say use a mental framework, because it means it's something that you can hang an idea on without necessarily putting it into a box. So that's the idea. And want to offer four frameworks that we can put we can put into the process here, so that we can actually figure out what our content is, how it works, and how it engages people. And that will, when we get these ideas dialed in, our stuff is on fire, will be on fire. And this applies to any kind of content. This applies to writing a blog post. Well, actually, you're the one, Tim. You're the one, we've been talking about some of this stuff, and you're saying, dude, these ideas apply to everything.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the four are, but
well, but it was just the idea of how to make good content. Just that idea.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about that a little bit. I've been scratching my head. I'm going, dude, he's right. And this is a really big can of worms. I haven't quite figured how to make this apply to everything in life and have it make sense. But just in terms of what we're talking here, it's I want to offer these four frameworks. And here they are. They are identity. They are function framework. They are the structural framework and the engagement framework. And we're just going to talk about each one. And basically, Tim, you already did. You already alluded to the idea of this most important thing of the identity framework, where you say, why does it exist? Who is it for? And what's the value? I'd be curious to know, how did you come to a place where those were the very first questions that you're asking on a consult?
How did that happen? It's not how it started. I remember that. I think it was 2014, maybe 13, probably. And I got introduced, that's around 2013 is when I started growing this business, Video Creators, because I had done YouTube strategy for years prior, full-time, for other organizations and companies and stuff for their clients. But when the last company I worked at was kind of closing down that department, I was like, all right, I'm going to go do for myself what I've been teaching other people to do for years. And it was through that I had to really start learning about business. And the more I learned about business, the more I was like, oh, like all these principles are pretty much transferable. Like it's about value creation and value exchange. And it's about like, how do I, like, who is my product for? And like the same principles I get people to consume a YouTube video are the same principles I get them to consume a product. So from a certain brand / company or creator in our case. So value proposition target audience came out of a book called Business Model Generation, which is one of my favorite business books because it's got lots of big fonts and colors in it and pictures and stuff. I'm like, all right, now we're tracking. Now I can understand. That's right. Now I understand what business is kind of like. So, and in there, they talk a lot about that as kind of two foundations. There's others too, but those are the two biggest ones that I'm like, okay, like it doesn't really matter how amazing my videos are edited. Even if I had the ability to edit American Ninja Warrior like Jeff Bartsch, even if I could make it like that, but I still didn't understand who the audience was or what the value was, like the audience isn't going to care. They're going to be like, you got fancy editing skills. Good for you. Like, I don't care about the content. So it's like not about just the skill level. It's like getting people to like, is this for me and do I care? And those two questions are, you got to subliminally ask those or answer those pretty quickly for a new viewer in order to get some traction.
Yeah. So that would be the first framework that I'd offer is the identity framework. And that's, again, it's about why does this exist? Who is it for and what's the value? So then the second framework that we need to figure out to create our very best content is the function framework. And this is like, if you've been around video creators for any amount of time, guaranteed you've heard Tim talk about this because you were actually the first person that I heard talk about this, the buckets of content.
You're making me sound super smart, and yet I have no idea where these are going.
No,
like some of the stuff you get, like some people do intuitively, and I think that frustrates the people who don't. So it's good that you've been able to identify some of this. No pun intended with the identify thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, and the thing is, it's part of it is like a lot of this is. There are smart people everywhere, and there are a lot of things that people say that are true and that apply to certain people in certain ways at certain times. But the trick is finding out how to make sense of it all. It's like what applies to me and when and all this stuff. And so this is one of the things that I first heard about from you when I was first starting out my channel. I'm like, this makes a lot of sense because you can't have your content try to do everything and be everything. So for people who have not heard your bucket ideas of the discoverable and the community and all that stuff, how would you just describe that in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, there's like in marketing world, too many people have multiple different goals for each video, where they don't make the mistake anywhere else. But when it comes to online video, they want every video to get lots of views and they engage their audience and they get a lot of new subscribers and generate a lot of ad revenue and get a lot of people to their website to sign up and generate a lot of sales. And they want to go big on Reddit. Like they have all these different things that they goals for one piece of content. And that is a great way for that video to do none of those things well. And so we basically say, just pick one goal for this piece of content. Is it to be like become discoverable? The three kind of main goals or buckets that we use is discoverable. Is it to generate like and strengthen community, or is it to generate sales? So it's kind of like, if you want to put it in marketing language, just generate leads, nurture the relationship, and convert, right? So, but it's the same thing on like the YouTube channel. And so we have like, just pick one goal for that video and make it nail that one thing, as opposed to like trying to do 13 things with one video.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, that is one of those things when you get that in place, when you know what the identity of your piece is, who it's for, why it exists, and what's the value. And then the function of it, what you want it to do. Everything flows out of that. And if you change, it's like switching the track on flipping the switch on a train track. I mean, you flip this switch on this track above, like downstream of where the train's going, like the direction of the train, your video is going to go in a completely different direction. So that's why this stuff is so important to figure out first. And so actually, a question for you. At one point you had a fourth bucket. And then
I do. Yeah.
I recently heard you kind of scaling back on that. It's like you've always had the discoverable and the community and the sales. And then tell me about the fourth bucket and how that's
Well,
evolving in your world.
there's a fourth bucket that I used to talk more about, called the buzz bucket. And the bucket is whenever you want to generate a lot of buzz in your industry for your brand. And I don't talk about it as much because to do it successfully requires a lot of time, a lot of planning, a lot of strategy. Like you do
Collaboration
maybe,
off.
yeah, even like budget. And it's because like to generate a lot of buzz in your industry with a piece of content, like most creators just can't successfully pull that off. And those who could probably don't need to, like they shouldn't focus on it. So like the people who are using that, like going for that as a goal, it's a pretty narrow, small sub audience, I guess, of like most people are video creators. And I found that when I talk about it to everyone, the people who, like a lot of people get hung up on it and they're just kind of like, oh, I could never do that. And like that's new, like when I go into the details of how it works,
No.
and they're right. Most people shouldn't even bother. So just focus on discoverable, community, and sales. And then when we work with clients, if it makes sense for them to kind of explore the buzz, then I'll go into that more fully. But for the most part, like the lowest common denominator is that every creator should be doing at least those three buckets.
No. So okay, because and you basically described exactly what my initial feelings were when I heard about that. First time I heard you talk about the buzz video, I'm like, okay, that sounds really
intense,
intense,
over the top. Yeah.
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 So
it's not for everybody.
Yeah. So you have the identity, you have the function framework, and then the third one is you have the structure framework, and that's all about how does it work. And with the main question is how can you keep people watching? And now this applies to anything. I mean, this again, applying this to the world outside YouTube. If you just anytime if you happen to pick up a physical newspaper, which who knows if anyone ever does that anymore, or let's just say you're looking at an article online, and what's the first thing you see? You see the headline, and that headline says, "Hey, this is what this is about." Then you go under that, and the first words in the first two sentences, the first paragraph of this article is, this is the main chunk of this. And everything below that explains it from there. And that's a concept that came straight from print journalism. And yeah, I mean, it's all about getting people's attention. And so when you're creating content on television, you definitely have that equivalent. You start out any given episode of television, whether it's scripted or unscripted, you're probably going to have something called a cold open or a tonight on. And it's that opening, usually pretty intense section saying, hey, this is what's happening and this is why you should watch the whole episode. So get your butt down on the couch and sit here for the full hour or whatever it is, or half hour. That's the idea of that open. So of course, if you're familiar with YouTube structure, then you know that there's a generally accepted structure for YouTube content. You have the open or the hook, then you usually tend to go into whatever branding you have, and then you have your content, and then at the end you have your call to action. And so that's one of those. It's all about how do you make people stick around. And the idea is, how do you make them a promise? How do you make them a promise that you can fulfill on through your content?
Is that different on YouTube than it is on television, or is that like in terms of how you execute that?
It's really similar. I mean, it really is very close to the same thing. I mean, you're doing something to grab their attention. So you might be showing like an intense part or an important part or especially interesting or exciting or entertaining part at the very beginning and saying, hey, check it, stick around because this is what's coming up. And if you're going to, and that applies equally on TV as it does on YouTube. It's like so much of this stuff, it's all communication. It's all about getting a message and from the sender to the receiver. And if the receiver doesn't know what to expect, the receiver is probably going to leave, especially if the receiver has a attention span the size of a gnat, as we all talk about people having on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
cool.
That's the third one. That's structure. Then the fourth one is the biggest one, and it's, well, in my opinion, it might not be accurate to say that it's the biggest one, because all this other stuff we've already talked about is super, super important, and it has to be put in place before you talk about the engagement. But the engagement becomes the most tricky part of this. You're saying, how does this piece make an impact on the viewer? And that's where you go down all sorts of rabbit holes. You talk about what is, what sub frameworks, if you will. We talk about story. Can I add story to this content? Should I? Is it possible to add story to content that doesn't seem to be story driven? The answer is yes to both of those. Yes, you can, and yes, you should. And I said, you and I have talked a lot about story and its increasing importance in terms of YouTube content. I'd be curious to know your take. After all your studying and all your work in story, where do you think things stand for the importance of that right now?
Higher and higher and higher all the time. It's just getting more and more important, because especially as thankfully, finally, people are starting to focus less on the technical stuff, which me and other YouTube educators have talked about for a while, but everyone wants to feel like there's someone else to blame other than myself for why my channel isn't doing well. The YouTube algorithm is against me, or I'm not using my tags properly, or I'm not posting at the right time of day, or like they look for those types of things. But really what it just comes down to is, did someone watch your video? When they did they like it? And did they watch more? And YouTube has a lot of different viewer signals that they track to kind of answer those questions. And the thing that we've seen makes the biggest difference consistently over and over and over again is the ability of the creator to tell a story, a meaningful story that means something to the viewer. We had one guy.
If I can jump in for a second, so what you're saying right there is makes difference, is meaningful to your audience, which is why you have to have that other stuff in place first.
Right. Yeah.
You can't just say, oh, well, I'm going to tell a story in my video, but if you don't know who you're talking to and what they want or what they don't want, what they expect, what they don't expect, what do they like, what do they not like, all this other stuff. If you don't know those questions are even there, it's going to be really hard to get things lined up with them. Right. So sorry, I totally interrupted you.
No, it's fine. Yeah. So we have one client who we were working through some of the story stuff with, and they weren't trying to be a butt. They were just kind of like wanted to be like, does this really work? Or so and this was a sizable-ish channel, just shy of 100,000 subscribers, and they decided to put this story stuff to the test. And we had gone through about 4-ish weeks through this thing that we do with some of our clients about how to engage them, how to teach them how to tell better stories. And at the end of it, he's like, let me see if this stuff actually works. So he sits down and he makes a video where all he does is tell 3 stories back to back, and no editing, no cuts. He's just sitting there like in his living room, just talking. That's it.
Is this any way? How does this compare to the stuff that he would normally do with his content?
It's pretty different. Like he usually had a videographer that would follow him around, and he'd be out on location and on sets, doing different things, and it was more produced for sure. Okay. But this is just like a one take, sit down, and he just told 3 stories back to back. no editing, no, just camera on a tripod. And it was a lot longer than normal content too. I think this video is like 18 minutes, whereas other ones are typically around like 6 to 8 minutes. And so he publishes it and he sends it to us. He's like, hey guys, want to test out this storytelling theory, see if it's right or not. And I'm just realizing that by so doing, I'm telling you a story right now, like everyone here, right? So I'm kind of, it's like super meta. But anyway, because I can see, and let me come back to this. All right. So anyway, the point, what happened in that story is that video became his top performing video.
Awesome.
And you look at the audience retention graphs and it just goes off the chart. It's like, it'll show you, here's what your normal video performance is like. And here's this video, boom. It's just like straight up. And so he's like, all right, I'm convinced data doesn't lie. Like this is what I got to do. And the other thing that we see, I'll stop talking and we won't jump into questions and I get more to share too. But is that even when I was telling that story, I can see how many congruent viewers are on the live stream at any given point right now. And when I start telling that story, the number goes up, it goes up. Like people don't leave when you're telling the story, right? And then as soon as the story is over, I saw the numbers go down. I can see it literally like right here on this graph in front of me. Same thing is true when I don't know if she's still here, but Zested Foods, who was in the chat just a moment ago, Christine, we introduced our kids to her channel because we did a collab with them. And my kids, like they'll watch, it's a cooking show, they enjoy Christine's videos, but whenever she starts like just throwing it like this little stuff about like this cornbread and like when her grandma used to make it and stuff, like my kids, like they stop, like whatever they're fidgeting with, and I can see like Christine has their attention way better than she did at any other point. And I think that's like the power of this stuff is like whatever, it's not like you're like, well, I do educational videos, how am I gonna throw a story into it? It's like maybe you turn the entire tutorial into a story, or sometimes there might be some very strictly utilitarian type of things like just tell me how to change the freaking car battery. I don't care that this reminds you about your grandpa,
Right.
So there are those instances, but if you can make the story feel pretty natural and as a part of the content, like hopefully I did here, and you gave me a layup for, that performs even best, and I can just watch it right in the data. So I don't remember cool. your original story, your question, but that preaches well whatever I just talked about.
No, well, and the thing is, it's not a lot of people. I hear more and more people talking about the importance of story, and a lot of people feel like, oh, well, it's this new buzzword thing. Yeah. Folks, this is not new.
No.
This is not new. I mean, story is a fundamental way that human beings connect with other human beings. And what you want to go back and talk about models. If the only model that we've ever been exposed to is our view of the world, we should not be kicking ourselves for the fact that we don't understand how other people live their lives, because we're not living their lives. We don't know their mental models. So a lot of, there's, this could very easily go down a social and political rabbit hole, which I'm going to stay away from. Though I will say, when you see someone who is different from you, when we see people who are different from us, a lot of times people will say, oh, well, you just have to show empathy. You have to be, you just have to imagine what it's like to be in their shoes. Well, sometimes that's next to impossible to do unless you get a little insight into their mental model of how they see the world and what life is like for them. And the number one way that happens is if we hear each other's stories. I did a video. I did a video a while back talking about my son, who my wife and I adopted both of our children. And my son's heritage, his background is mixed race. His birth mother is Caucasian and his birth father is African American. And so it's been this journey of me realizing the way that I grew up the way that I've always seen the world, living in places where everyone looked like me, it will inherently be different for him because he does not look like me in terms of his skin color. And no matter how we raise him, no matter how, the world will see him with a different color of skin. And we have to figure out how to navigate that. And the only way that I was able to even realize that this was a thing was by hearing other people's stories. So there, I could go on and on and on about that, but just that these mental models are what are transmitted between people through the stories that we tell. It's such a big deal. Can't stress that enough.
Yeah. Guys, you who are here in the chat, we're about to jump into Q&A, and I know some of you already asked questions, and I see other of them coming in. So if you have questions for Jeff and I about this, ask now. But before we jump into that, those questions, Jeff, you are working on a resource for people that will help them with this. You want to tell us about what that is?
Absolutely. There's these ideas that we're talking about here is part of a larger presentation that I put together, and it is a full-length YouTube masterclass training that it's called 4 Strategies for Creating Your Ultimate Content on YouTube with Any Size Audience. And so I have a recording of that I want to make available to you. And because it has some time-sensitive elements in there, the recording will be taken down within just a few days. But because you're here and you're on Tim's channel, and we, like both of us, we really care about giving you tools to actually make this happen for you. This training really digs into these ideas more and gives you some tools to help you apply this stuff to your own stuff. So that's what I want to have. I want to offer to you. And to get that, just go to sgreplay.com. And that is SG as in Story Green Light, my channel, sgreplay.com.
I was reading it differently. I was reading it S-Greeplay. Like Gree was part of the green, Gree. No. And I'm like, I guess the full green part wasn't there. I get it now. SG Replay makes way more sense than SGRE Play. No. So, yeah. All right. SGreplay.com. That's way easier. So you guys can check that out. And so they got to go get it now, though, because you're going to take it down and move on to some other stuff pretty soon with it. So. Yes, guys, check it out. All right. Got some questions. We start with members. Those of you guys who are channel members, appreciate each of you guys. Be Adventure Partners, Modern Day Tech, Tronics Fix, Guns and Guitars. I think like all of those guys, well, not Guns and Guitars, but they were all part of a Video Labs group together. But we got Miggy, Wiggy, and Creating Family Moments, and all of you guys who are just members here. Like, we just appreciate you guys. We're going to jump in yours first. So Miggy Wiggy asks, how do you know if a video idea is something that people want to watch?
You want to take that, or should I?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I thought I was going to pitch all these to you, but yeah. So, I mean, I don't really think of it as, is this something people want to watch? I think of it more as, does this align with the value that I'm proposing to deliver on my channel? And then the video falls into one of two categories. It's either then a discoverable video, which would be ones that people would want to watch, even if they don't know who I am or care who Video Creators is or anything like that. And then it's either that discoverable category or it's the community category. We talked about that bucket, which is some people would never search for this and they have no idea. They would never otherwise click on this to watch it, but we like Tim Schmoyer, we like what Video Creator stands for, and we just watch the stuff he puts out because he never lets us down. And then at the end, it's like, see, I was right. Like, just anything that comes from this guy is great. Hopefully. So that is like, I just think about not just what do people want, but what do people need. And I think you have to sometimes give them what they want in order to give them what they need. But so I say, even if you don't think people will watch it, like, make it anyway if it's a message you think the world needs to hear. I'm not saying the video will go super big or anything like that, but if it reaches and impacts the people you want it to reach and impact, then I think it's a win. And so it's not really just about like how many views am I going to get. It's more like what kind of impact will this content make? And that's kind of the more like how I think about it anyway.
Well, and on top of that, you can always rely on interacting with your crowd, and if you know that they react super strong, have super strong reactions to certain content or a specific angle that you took on a different piece really resonated, and you can see that both through comments that they leave on the videos, or you can also just look by just the sheer performance numbers on the back end. Look at the retention. It's like if you have crazy retention on one certain category of video compared to others, there's your sign.
Yeah, and I just totally lost my train of thought right there. It just ended. I had something else, but I don't remember what it was.
It was brilliant.
It was. Yeah.
It'll be back.
Thank you, CJ Watson, for becoming a channel member. He's just became one at the trainings level. Good to have you. Amaracia, I think is how you say that. Question to Jeff. In a fictional type of content, how often should the camera switch angles, and is there any industry standard for this?
That is a loaded question. If you asked that question 50 years ago, the response would be you could let a shot run for 10 to 15 seconds. If you ask that question to Stanley Kubrick when he was making 2001: A Space Odyssey, there are literally shots that run for 3 minutes straight, and you're going, I remember the first time I saw that movie, I'm going, holy moly, this pacing is glacially slow. But, that was, frankly, I think that was even slow for the movie world at the time when that came out. But right now, like if you look up the average shot length in the modern movie, you will see all sorts of studies of how people have broken this down literally shot by shot with with however many movies come out in any given year. And the shot length just goes until people complain, like when you go see a spy movie where things are blowing up or whatever, you feel like you're having a seizure just by watching it. And so in scripted content, applying that to our content, to our creating here, my encouragement would be use your pacing to be a tool to communicate the energy and or the emotion, because the faster the cuts go, the more energetic, the more upbeat things tend to be, and the slower things go, the longer the shots go, the more likely you are to have people be in a more calm, contemplative state. So if you're wanting to catch people off guard, boom, then you just you slam an extra cut or two to jolt people out of wherever they happen to be. So broad strokes, if you're cutting scripted content, shot length should be a function of the desired energy that you want to create.
Great. Dan from Creator Fundamentals. Hey, man. Asks also a channel member question. Yeah, he said in the chat it was good seeing you at Vid Summit last week.
For sure.
Yeah. Tim, how have your storytelling type videos performed compared to traditional talking head type content? This is something I've contemplated and explored. Yeah, I've talked about this in length, actually, and I think I have a whole dedicated podcast episode from last year to this topic, and the experiments I was doing around story on my channel. The really short version is that they perform better for me than any of my other content in terms of watch time and audience retention graphs, and even in terms of views. Some of them now have quadruple, 5x, 8x the views. I'm not sure what that means. Is that octuplets? I'm not even sure what that is. Octuples the views.
Works for me.
As normal videos. And so I have a whole series actually coming out that's just kind of called Creator Stories, which I've talked a lot about. I just shot another one a couple weeks ago, and I'm waiting to get 10 episodes in the can. Actually, Jeff is helping me with those. So
true story.
Yeah. And Jeff is actually he's actually episode 1, Mr. Jeff Bartsch. So you guys will see that, which we shot over a year ago. We still haven't got it published.
We shot it at VidCon
2018. 18, yeah, a year and a half ago.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah, but yeah, they're performing way better, and I'm really excited for the new format, which is going to be almost 100% just storytelling. But by the time you get to the end, you've like learned something too, and you're like, oh, now I actually know I need to do this thing, not just here's something to do. But now you're probably going to be more emotionally committed to actually doing the thing that's going to make the difference instead of just getting some more head knowledge. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I can't say these names. What was wrong with me? Esperanto variety show. I'm tempted
Esperanto variety show.
There you go.
Did you know Esperanto is actually a language? Are you familiar
that I don't speak?
Well, it's a constructed language that people. I forget the name of the gentleman who came up with it, but it's a language that was designed to bring people together. And I never even knew it until I found out about Esperanto variety show. Oh,
cool. Yeah, they're a regular around here, so good to see them again. I am tempted to try the idea of just telling a story. Should I be concerned about B-roll and camera angles or just talk to the camera?
That depends on what you have available and what you want to, what effect you want to create when you're doing it. Because if you have... just in broad strokes, you're going to, the idea is show instead of just tell. Now, you can look at YouTube and say, well, there are entire channels that are all about story time, and they're all about just sitting in front of the camera and talking. And like, well, that, there is a part of YouTube that works for that, In general, though, if you can show what you're talking about, the overall experience will be heightened. So if there's something that you can put in for B-roll, do it. Show what you're talking about. Don't just say it.
Yep. Cool. Ramus Flensborg. Do either of you have good recommendations on books on story? We were just discussing that in the chat. My favorite one is Donald Miller, A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. That's one of my favorites. It's not super like educational in terms of story, but it is about a guy. It's a story about a guy who learns how to tell a story by translating his life story for film on video. So I think it translates well to what we're doing. And I saw the people in chat sharing different resources and stuff too by like Ted Decker, which I don't know about. I have a whole book that goes to it. Margot Lightman is a favorite storytelling educator of mine. Who has a book, I'm drawing a blank. Do you know what it is, Jeff? I interviewed her. I have a whole podcast interview with her. Oh, Long Story Short. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, that one. So, and Pixar has, through Khan Academy, has a free, it's called Pixar in a Box. It's a free online course. You can learn a ton about story from those guys. If you just search for Khan Academy, Pixar in a Box, you'll find that it's free to go through. It's really good.
And I haven't been seeing the chat because I've been wanting to pay attention to the conversation here. I did someone in the chat. Sorry. The least I can do, I suppose. Did someone in the chat talk about Save the Cat?
No, but that is a good one too.
Okay, there's a if you want to learn about screenplays and how to structure screenplays, which basically, when you're crafting a story, all stories follow some sort of function, like the story framework. We've been talking about frameworks. It's just that the longer your content, the more intricate the framework needs to be to hold people's attention and keep them engaged. And so when you're talking about an hour long or 90 minutes or 2 hours, you have to be really, really good at this, and you have to really know the structure. And so one of the great books that people talk about is called Save the Cat, and that's talking about how to structure longer form story.
Yeah. And does your replay get into that stuff too?
Not specifically. That's something that we get more into our group coaching stuff.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sweet. In the Garden and the BBs. Can too much music harm a video, or does it help?
The answer is yes. and yes. So too much music can harm a video, but it all depends on what you are wanting. It's like all these initial frameworks. What do people want? What do they expect? What is going to work for the impact that you're trying to make? Now, you know, is there a place to have wall-to-wall music the whole time? Is there a place to have music up in your face a lot? Absolutely. Should that be happening all the time? Heck no. So it really does depend on what you are wanting the music to accomplish and what effect you want to accomplish with the piece itself. So kind of hard to get specific beyond that because it's such a varied,
You have a video on your channel about that, don't you? From like last year, 2 years ago, or you know how good I am with judging time now, so it could have been like a long time.
Join the club, man. It's if I
But
didn't
you have
have
one on there about like how to use music to set different tones. Like you have like the same clip and then use different types of music to set different moods with it.
Yeah, there's actually I have a whole
Called?
playlist about how to edit music. So if you go to Story Greenlight, my channel Story Greenlight, and there's a playlist about how to edit music, and that has multiple videos on there. So that'll set the stage for you and get super specific too at the end.
Yeah. One final question. Hey, Jeff, can you give a hypothetical example? This is from Guns and Guitars, by the way. Can you give a hypothetical example of how to do product reviews following your 4 mental frameworks? So if they follow that framework, how would you do a product review? On the spot, no prep. You just got to go for it.
Okay, so let's see. So you have to have those. You have to have the identity and the function concepts in place. You have to have those decided, and then so you know who your audience is and what they want and what style they're into. Now, I happen to know Guns and Guitars. Your crowd is very much into both those things, and so they tend to skew heavily male, and so that's that's something that you keep in mind. With your function, you want to make sure, I assume you're going to want to make this a discoverable thing, if that's the idea for the review, depending on what you decide, whether you want it to be discoverable or more community development. And so then the structure, the main thing to keep in mind is that you want to make sure that people have that promise, that hook at the very beginning. And if there's a way that you can open a loop, even a story loop, that says that asks a question, what happens next, and you can wait as long as humanly possible to answer that, then that's something that would go under your structure. Engagement, that really comes down to how your own personal style. I mean, I know your Guns and Guitars is a very well-established channel, so you already have an established style. You have an editorial style. You have the gear that you use, and that's where you can go off all sorts of different directions. So I don't know if that really answers your question specifically, because it's kind of hard to say, give a specific prescription for that. But those are the places that I would start.
Great. Cool. You guys want to learn more from Mr. Jeff? You can go to sgreplay.com and here in the next few days and get that full training from him about how to implement this stuff and to really nail down that ultimate YouTube video for you guys. You can go check that out. Any final thoughts from you, Jeff?
Yeah, going back to that whole Dunning-Kruger effect and how we start out being incompetent and we don't know it, and then we realize, oh crap, this is really kind of hard. Oh no, now what? I just like to encourage you to say that curve of going back up, where we gather more and more expertise and more confidence, like legitimate confidence, not the puffed up, stupid confidence. That takes time, there are ways where like people like Tim and I are here to help you shorten that learning curve so you can leapfrog ahead on what you've already learned. The thing is that process is an ongoing thing. And when that happens, a lot of people realize that you never, like, if you're serious about always learning and always growing, then you'll realize that you can never know everything. And so the fact that you are questioning, is this the right way to go ahead? Or am I doing everything possible? That's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of strength. And some of the people who are the very best in the world at what they do are, they are in that place because they constantly ask those questions. So be encouraged. Tim and I are both here to help you move forward along that curve and to keep asking those questions.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, guys, go check out more from Jeff at sgreplay.com or his YouTube channel. The links, all those will be in the show notes. You guys can check it out. And thank you guys for hanging out. Appreciate each of you guys for being here. And I will see you guys again next week for another Video Creators Podcast episode. See you guys then. Bye.
See ya.